Hello and welcome to Baker Street Chronicles, where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. Settle in as we embark on a chilling tale of mystery and deduction. Narrated by Dr. John H. Watson, set amidst the fog-laden streets of Victorian London. Chapter 1. A Knock in the Night. Hello and welcome to Baker Street Chronicles, where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. Settle by the hearth, dear reader, as I, Dr. John H. Watson, recount a tale of mystery that unfolded on a fog-shrouded evening in the heart of Victorian London, where the brilliance of Sherlock Holmes was once again called upon to pierce the veil of darkness. It was a bitter November evening in 1888, the kind that seemed to conspire with the elements to cloak London in an oppressive mantle of fog. The air was thick, damp, and heavy with the scent of coal smoke, pressing against the windows of 221B Baker Street like an uninvited guest. The gas lamps outside cast a feeble glow, their lights swallowed by the swirling mists that rendered the street below a mere suggestion of shapes and shadows. Within our modest lodgings, the fire crackled in the grate, casting a warm, flickering light across the room. I sat in my armchair, my old service revolver freshly cleaned and lying idle on the table beside me, a relic of my days in Afghanistan. Across from me, Sherlock Holmes lounged in his own chair, his long fingers steepled beneath his chin, his violin resting silent upon the table. His eyes, sharp and restless, betrayed a mind craving occupation, for idleness was ever his adversary. The clock upon the mantel had just struck 9 when a sharp, insistent rap at the door shattered the quiet. I glanced at Holmes, whose expression shifted from languor to keen interest in an instant. Mrs. Hudson, our ever-patient landlady, appeared moments later, her face etched with the mild irritation of one disturbed from her evening routine. "A lady to see you, Mr. Holmes," she announced, her tone suggesting she found such late callers an affront to propriety. "A Miss Eleanor Grayson. She seems in quite a state, yet commanding," gesturing to the chair nearest the fire. "You are chilled to the bone. Warm yourself, and tell us what brings you to Baker Street at such an hour." She nodded, a small, jerky motion, and sank into the chair, her hands trembling as she removed her gloves. I took my place beside her, ready to offer what comfort I could, while Holmes resumed his seat, his eyes fixed upon her with that piercing intensity that seemed to see through flesh to the very soul. "My name is Eleanor Grayson," she began, her voice low and unsteady, as though each word cost her dearly. "I come to you, Mr. Holmes, because I am told you are the only man in London who can unravel the impossible. My brother, Thomas Grayson, is dead, found 2 nights ago in a Whitechapel alley. The police say it was a robbery, a random act of violence, but I know it cannot be so. There is something more, something sinister." Holmes leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his fingers still steepled. "Begin at the beginning, Miss Grayson, and omit no detail, however trivial it may seem. The truth often hides in the mundane." She drew a shuddering breath, her eyes fixed on the fire as though drawing strength from its warmth. Thomas was a clerk at Messrs. Hargreave and Sons, a respectable firm in the city. He was diligent, kind, and had no enemies, at least, none that I knew. But in the weeks before his death, he changed. He grew secretive, nervous, as though some weight pressed upon him. He would not confide in me, though we were close. 3 days ago, he told me he had uncovered something dangerous, he said, but he would not elaborate. He promised to explain all soon, but then Her voice broke and she pressed a handkerchief to her lips. "Go on," Holmes prompted, his tone devoid of impatience, though I knew his mind was already sifting her words for clues. "2 nights ago," she continued, "he did not return home. I waited until dawn, growing frantic. At first light, a constable came to our lodgings in Bloomsbury. They had found Thomas in The police. What have they done?" "Little enough," Miss Grayson said bitterly. "Inspector Gregson believes it was a robbery gone wrong, that Thomas was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But Whitechapel was not a place he frequented. Why was he there? And why that key? I fear there is more to this, Mr. Holmes. Some secret he uncovered that cost him his life. I beg you, find the truth. I cannot rest until I know why my brother died." Her plea hung in the air, heavy with grief and desperation. I felt a pang of sympathy, for her loss was raw and palpable, and I glanced at Holmes, wondering what he made of this tale. His face was unreadable, but I knew that look, the calm before the storm of his intellect. "Have you anything else to add, Miss Grayson?" he asked. "Any detail of your brother's habits, his associates, or his final days?" She hesitated, then reached into her reticule and produced a small, folded piece of paper. "This was among his effects, returned to me by the police. It was in his pocket, but they paid it no mind. It's just a scrap, but it seemed important to him." Holmes took the paper, unfolding it with care. I leaned closer, catching a glimpse of a few scrawled words in a hurried hand. Lavender, midnight, vault. Beneath them was a crude sketch of the same symbol Miss Grayson had described, a circle with a cross and crescent. Holmes's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, a sign that his curiosity was fully engaged. "Very well, Miss Grayson," he said, folding the paper and slipping it into his pocket. "I shall take your case. The matter intrigues me, and I suspect there is indeed more here than a simple robbery. Return home and rest if you can. Watson and I shall begin our inquiries at once." She rose, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Holmes. I knew you would understand. Please, find justice for Thomas." Mrs. Hudson escorted her out, and the door closed softly behind her. Holmes sat in silence for a moment, his gaze distant, his mind already racing it. As for midnight, it implies secrecy, urgency. We shall begin at the scene of the crime, Watson. Tomorrow we venture into the fog. He lit his pipe, the smoke curling upward like the mist outside, and I felt a familiar thrill. A new mystery had begun, and with it, the promise of adventure in the shadowed heart of London. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Fog. The morning following Miss Eleanor Grayson's visit to 221B Baker Street dawned no brighter, with London still gripped by a fog so dense it seemed the city itself held its breath. The air was heavy with the acrid tang of coal smoke and the damp chill of November. And as I, Dr. John H. Watson, prepared to accompany Sherlock Holmes into the heart of Whitechapel, I felt a prickle of unease. The mystery of Thomas Grayson's death, marked by that curious brass key and cryptic note, had ignited Holmes's intellect, and I knew we were embarking on a path fraught with shadows and secrets. Holmes, clad in his deerstalker and greatcoat, his cane tapping lightly against the cobbles, led the way through the labyrinthine streets of the East End. His face was set in that familiar mask of concentration, his eyes scanning every detail of our surroundings. The fog swirled about us, muffling the clatter of hansom cabs and the distant cries of street vendors. Gas lamps flickered feebly, their light barely piercing the gloom. casting eerie halos that seemed to float in the mist. We had set out for the alley off Commercial Street where Thomas Grayson had met his end, a place that, by Miss Grayson's account, was as foreign to her brother as the moon. Whitechapel is a curious choice for a clerk of Thomas Grayson's station, Holmes remarked as we navigated a narrow passage, the walls slick with damp. A man of his habits, orderly, reserved, would not wander here without purpose. We must discover what drew him to this forsaken corner of London. I nodded, clutching my coat tighter against the chill. The key, perhaps? Or the note? Lavender, midnight, vault. Could he have been meeting someone? Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. Examine a scuff mark or a smear of dirt. The police have trampled the scene as expected, he muttered, his tone laced with disdain. Yet traces remain for those who know where to look. He pointed to a series of faint scratches on the cobbles, barely discernible in the dim light. These marks suggest a struggle, brief but violent. Grayson was not taken unawares. He fought, however briefly. And here, he leaned closer, his nose nearly touching the ground. A trace of something peculiar. I bent down, squinting at the spot he indicated. At first, I saw nothing but the grime of the alley. But then I caught it, a faint, sweet scent, out of place amidst the filth. Lavender? I asked, recalling the note. Precisely, Holmes replied, his voice sharp with interest. A scent not native to Whitechapel's alleys. It may belong to the killer or to something Grayson carried. We shall see. He rose, his gaze sweeping the alley's walls, where posters peeled from the damp bricks and windows stared blankly down like empty eyes. At the far end, a pile of refuse spilled from an overturned crate, and Holmes made his way toward it, his steps deliberate. He sifted through the debris, a broken bottle, a sodden newspaper, a scrap of cloth, until his fingers closed around something small and metallic. He held it up to the light. A single cufflink, tarnished but engraved with the same symbol Miss Grayson had described, a circle with a cross and a crescent moon. A clue, Watson, Holmes said, slipping the cufflink into his pocket. This symbol is no mere ornament. It speaks of intent, perhaps affiliation. We must learn its meaning. As we lingered in the alley, a small figure emerged from the fog, a street urchin, no more than 10, his clothes ragged and his face smudged with dirt. His eyes, bright and wary, fixed on Holmes, recognizing a man who might pay for information. Holmes, ever quick to seize opportunity, beckoned the boy closer and pressed a shilling into the fog as swiftly as he'd appeared. Holmes turned to me, his expression alight with the thrill of the chase. A cloaked figure, a cane, and the scent of lavender. The threads begin to weave, Watson. Our next step is to trace this key and its symbol. The pawnbroker mentioned by Miss Grayson may hold answers. We left the alley, the fog closing around us like a curtain, and made our way toward Spitalfields, where the pawnbroker's shop lay. The streets grew busier as we moved, with costermongers shouting their wares and hansom cabs rattling past, their wheels muffled by the mist. The city was alive, yet it felt as though we walked through a dream, where every shape was softened, every sound dulled. Holmes was silent for much of the journey, his mind no doubt racing through possibilities. I too pondered the clues, the key, the cufflink, the note, the lavender scent. What had Thomas Grayson stumbled upon that warranted such a violent end? Was it greed, revenge, or something darker? The symbol, with its circle, cross, and crescent, nagged at me, its meaning just out of reach. As we approached the pawnbroker's shop, a dingy establishment wedged between a tavern and a butcher's, Holmes paused, his eyes scanning the street. "Be on your guard, Watson," he said quietly. "We are not alone in this hunt. The killer, whoever he is, knows the value of that key. He may be watching." I felt a chill that had little to do with the fog. My hand strayed to the revolver in my coat pocket, a habit from my army days, and I nodded. "I'm ready, Holmes." He gave me a brief, approving glance, then pushed open the door to the shop. A bell jangled overhead, and we stepped into a cluttered space lit by a single oil lamp. Shelves groaned under the weight of trinkets, clocks, jewelry, old books, and the air was thick with the musty scent of neglect. Behind the counter stood a man, thin and nervous, his eyes darting to us as we entered. "Mr. Silas Hodge?" Holmes asked, his tone polite but edged with authority. The man cracks in the door. Holmes's warning still echoed in my mind. We were not alone in this hunt. My hand rested near the revolver in my coat pocket, a precaution born of instinct rather than certainty. Behind the counter stood Mr. Silas Hodge, a wiry man with a pinched face and eyes that darted like a cornered animal's. His apron was stained, his fingers stained with ink, and his demeanor suggested a man who lived in perpetual fear of discovery. Holmes, ever the master of first impressions, fixed him with a gaze that was both courteous and unrelenting, a predator sizing up its prey. "Mr. Hodge," Holmes began, his voice smooth but carrying an edge that brooked no evasion. "We are here regarding a brass key, pawned by a man named Thomas Grayson, who now lies dead in a Whitechapel alley. You will tell us all you know of it." Hodge's hands twitched, and he wiped them nervously on his apron. I don't know nothing about no murder," he stammered, his eyes flicking toward the door as though expecting it to burst open. "Grayson, you say?" "Yeah, he came in maybe a week ago. Pawned a key, like you said. Odd thing, old-fashioned with some fancy mark on it. Paid me fair for it, and that's all I know." Holmes leaned forward, his elbows resting on the counter, his eyes never leaving Hodge's face. "Describe the key, Mr. Hodge, and do not omit the details of who else took an interest in it. I assure you I shall know if you lie." The pawnbroker swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing like a cork in a storm. It was brass, heavy, about 3 inches long. Had a symbol, a circle with a cross and a crescent moon, like the lady said. Grayson wouldn't say what it opened, just that it was important. Seemed nervous, kept looking over his shoulder. I logged it in my ledger like always. He gestured to a thick leather-bound book on the counter, its pages yellowed and curling. Holmes's fingers tapped lightly on the counter, a rhythm that seemed to unnerve Hodge further. "Alley." Hodge's eyes widened slightly. "Could be. Didn't pay it much mind. Look, I don't want trouble. I just take what's brought to me, no questions asked." Holmes straightened, his gaze piercing. "Your ledger, Mr. Hodge. Show it to me." The pawnbroker hesitated, then slid the book across the counter with trembling hands. Holmes flipped it open, his fingers moving swiftly through the pages until he found the entry for Grayson's key. The description matched Miss Grayson's, brass, ornate, with the same symbol, But there was more. A scrawled note in the margin read, Ashford, 50 guineas offered, refused. Below it, in a different hand, was a single word. Vault. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Vault, Mr. Hodge. An interesting choice of word. Did Grayson mention anything about a vault? Hodge shook his head vigorously. No, sir, not a word. He just said the key was important, that's all. I swear it. Holmes closed the ledger with a snap, his expression unreadable. Very well. But I advise you, Mr. Hodge, to keep this conversation to yourself. There are those who would not take kindly to your cooperation. The pawnbroker nodded, his face pale, and we turned to leave. As we stepped back into the fog, the bell jangling behind us, I felt the weight of the mystery deepen. The key, the symbol, the lavender scent, and now this Lord Ashford, all pieces of a puzzle that Holmes was already assembling in his mind. But there was something else, a nagging sense of being watched, though the fog revealed no pursuer. We walked in silence for a time, the cobbles slick beneath our boots, the fog muffling the sounds of Spitalfields, shouts of hawkers, the clatter of carts, the occasional wail of a child. Holmes's mind was elsewhere, his eyes scanning the mist as though it might yield answers. I broke the silence, unable to contain my curiosity. This Lord Ashford, I said. Do you think he's our man? A collector with a temper, a cane, and the scent of lavender. It fits the urchin's description. Holmes's lip, man who does not wish to be noticed. We shall keep him in mind, Watson. But for now, our path lies with Lord Ashford. His address will be in the peerage records, and I intend to pay him a visit. As we continued, the fog seemed to close in tighter, as though conspiring to hide the truth. My thoughts returned to Thomas Grayson, a clerk caught in something far larger than himself. The key, the cufflink, the lavender scent, all pointed to a secret worth killing for. But what was it? A treasure, a scandal, or something more sinister? And why had Grayson been in that alley at midnight? Holmes's voice broke my reverie. The symbol, Watson. The circle, cross, and crescent. It is not unfamiliar. I recall a treatise on esoteric societies, one of which used such a mark. If Grayson was entangled with such a group, it would explain his secrecy and his fate. An esoteric society? I asked, incredulous. You mean some secret order like the Freemasons? Perhaps, Holmes said, his tone guarded. But darker, I wager. The key suggests a literal vault, but the symbol hints at something ceremonial, perhaps ritualistic. We shall need to consult my files at Baker Street. As we neared a hansom cab stand, the fog parted briefly, revealing the silhouette of a man in a cloak, leaning on a cane, watching us from across the street. He turned and vanished before I could point him out, but Holmes's sharp intake of breath told me he had seen him too. Quickly, Watson, he said, hailing a cab. The game grows more dangerous by the hour. We climbed into the cab, the driver urging his horse into the mist. As we rattled toward Baker Street, I felt the weight of the mystery pressing upon me. The pawnbroker's tale had given us a name, Lord Ashford, but it had also deepened the shadows. Who was the scarred man? And who was the cloaked figure in the fog? The answers lay ahead, hidden in the labyrinth of London's secrets. And I knew Holmes would not rest until Pall Mall. its facade a study in grandeur with tall columns and polished brass fittings. The fog had thinned slightly here, allowing the gas lamps to cast a warm glow across the cobblestones, but the air remained chill and heavy. Inside, the club was a world apart from Whitechapel's grime, a haven of polished wood, leather armchairs, and the low murmur of conversation punctuated by the clink of glasses. The scent of cigar smoke and brandy hung in the air, and I felt acutely aware of my own plain attire amidst the tailored suits of London's elite. Holmes, undeterred by the opulence, approached the porter with his usual air of authority. "We are here to see Lord Reginald Ashford," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "A matter of some urgency." The porter, a stern man with a waxed mustache, eyed us warily but consulted his register. "His lordship is in the smoking room," he said at length, gesturing toward a heavy oak door. "I'll announce you." "No need," Holmes replied smoothly, brushing past him with a confidence that silenced objection. I followed, my hand instinctively checking the revolver in my coat pocket, though I doubted it would be needed in such a place. Still, the memory of the cloaked figure in the fog kept my nerves taut. The smoking room was a haze of cigar smoke, its walls lined with portraits of stern-faced aristocrats. Lord Ashford sat in a corner, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, his hair silvered at the temples and his face marked by the arrogance of wealth. He held a glass of brandy, his silver-tipped cane resting against his chair, and his eyes narrowed as we approached. The faint scent of lavender clung to him, unmistakable and chilling in its familiarity. "Lord Ashford," Holmes began, his voice polite but edged with steel. "I am Sherlock Holmes, and this is my colleague, Dr. Watson. We are investigating the death of Thomas Grayson, a man connected to a brass key you sought to purchase from a Spitalfields pawnbroker. I trust you will enlighten us as to your interest in it." Ashford's expression flickered, a momentary crack in club. "Dining with colleagues. Ask the porter if you doubt me. As for the key, it was a trinket, nothing more. I collect such things, as I said. If Grayson was killed, it's no concern of mine." Holmes leaned closer, his voice low and deliberate. "A trinket with a symbol, a circle, cross, and crescent moon. The same symbol on a cufflink found in the alley where Grayson died. The same symbol in your ledger entry, marked Vault. You will forgive me, Lord Ashford, if I find your account incomplete." Ashford's eyes widened, but he quickly masked his unease with a laugh. "You're grasping at shadows, Holmes. Symbols, cufflinks, what nonsense. I'm a busy man and I've no time for your theories. Good day." He rose, his cane tapping sharply on the floor, and strode toward the door. Holmes watched him go, his expression unreadable but his mind clearly racing. "A man with much to hide," he murmured. "But not our killer, I think. His alibi will hold, Watson, for now. Yet his interest in the key is no coincidence. We must dig deeper." As we left the club, the fog seemed to press closer, as though conspiring to obscure the truth. My thoughts churned. Ashford's lavender scent, his cane, his evasiveness. It all pointed to guilt, yet Holmes's caution suggested otherwise. "If not Ashford, then who?" I asked as we hailed a cab. "Patience, Watson," Holmes replied, his eyes scanning the street. "The killer is cunning, weaving a web of misdirection. Ashford is a thread, but not the spider. We need another perspective." Our next stop was a tavern near Whitechapel, A lead from one of Holmes's irregulars, a barmaid who had seen Thomas Grayson the night he died. The tavern was a stark contrast to the gentlemen's club, its air thick with the reek of ale and unwashed bodies. The barmaid, a stout woman named Maggie with a sharp tongue and sharper eyes, wiped her hands on her apron as we approached. "Aye, I saw Grayson," she said, pouring a pint with practiced ease. "Came in late." Suspicions shift. Ashford with his wealth and secrecy, and now this sailor, rough and volatile, both tied to Grayson, both potential killers. Yet Holmes's words echoed misdirection. The symbol, the key, the lavender scent. They pointed to something larger, something hidden in the fog of London's underbelly. We returned to Baker Street as dusk fell, the gas lamps flickering to life, their light swallowed by the mist. Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling upward like the fog outside, and spread his notes across the table. The cufflink, the ledger, Grayson's cryptic note. He arranged them like pieces on a chessboard, his mind seeking the pattern. "The sailor is a new variable," he said at length. "But the symbol ties it all together. I've recalled the treatise I mentioned, a secret society, the Order of the Crescent Veil, used such a mark in the last century. They were smugglers, Watson, dealing in stolen antiquities. If Grayson stumbled upon their modern incarnation, it would explain his secrecy and his death." "A smuggling ring?" I asked, incredulous. "Involving a lord like Ashford?" "Quite possibly," Holmes replied, his eyes narrowing. "Wealth often masks darker dealings. But we need evidence, Watson. The sailor, the vault, the key. We must find where they converge." As he spoke, a faint noise came from the street. A tap, like a cane on cobbles, followed by the rustle of a cloak. Holmes was at the window in an instant, but the fog revealed nothing. "We are watched," he said softly, his voice tinged with excitement. "The game tightens, Watson. Tomorrow, we pursue the sailor and the vault. But tonight, we must be vigilant." I nodded, my hand on my revolver, the shadows of suspicion deepening around us. The mystery of Thomas Grayson's death was a labyrinth, and each step revealed new turns. Ashford, the sailor, the Order of the Crescent Veil. Yet I trusted Holmes to lead us through, his intellect a beacon in the fog. Chapter 5. With the shadows cast by the flickering gaslight. His desk was a chaos of papers, notes on the case, sketches of the symbol, and pages torn from his extensive collection of obscure texts. I sat by the fire, my mind replaying the day's events. Ashford's evasive arrogance, the sailor's heated argument with Grayson, and the ever-present fog that seemed to cloak the truth as surely as it shrouded London's streets. A sudden rustle at the door broke my reverie. Mrs. Hudson, her face pale with unease, appeared holding a small envelope. "This was slipped under the door, Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice trembling. "No one rang, and I saw no one in the street. It's unsettling." Holmes took the envelope, his eyes narrowing as he examined it. It was of fine quality, sealed with red wax, but bore no address or mark save a faint trace of lavender scent. He broke the seal and withdrew a single sheet of paper, its surface covered in a series of cryptic symbols written in crimson ink. The symbols were unfamiliar, a jumble of lines, curves, and dots, but at the center was the now familiar circle with a cross and crescent moon. "A cipher," Holmes murmured, his voice alight with fascination. He spread the paper on his desk, the lamplight casting the symbols into sharp relief. This is no idle message, Watson. The crimson ink, the lavender scent. It is a challenge, a warning, or perhaps both. I leaned over his shoulder, studying the paper. The symbols were precise, almost elegant, but their meaning eluded me. Can you decipher it? I asked, knowing Holmes's knack for unraveling such mysteries. He smiled, a rare glint of excitement in his eyes. With time, Watson, all ciphers yield their secrets. This one is complex, but not impenetrable. The symbol of the crescent veil is the key. It suggests a code rooted in their traditions. Let us begin. He lit another lamp, its glow banishing the shadows from the desk, and set to work. His fingers moved swiftly, sketching the symbols, cross-referencing them with a dusty tome from his shelf. A destination, Watson. But we must tread carefully. This message was meant to be found, perhaps to lure us, perhaps to warn us. Either way, it points to a specific place and time. He rose, retrieving a map of London from his cluttered shelves and spread it across the desk. His finger traced the streets of the East End, pausing at a cluster of warehouses near the Thames. The vault mentioned in Grayson's note and the pawnbroker's ledger is likely a physical location, a hidden storehouse, perhaps used by the Order of the Crescent Veil. The docks are a logical choice. Secluded, busy enough to mask illicit activity, and close to Whitechapel. But why send us a cipher? I asked, puzzled. If the killer knows we're investigating, why not act directly? Holmes's lips curved into a wry smile. Arrogance, Watson, or strategy. The killer, or their master, wishes to toy with us, to test our mettle. Or they seek to divert us, to keep us from the true prize. The key is the linchpin. It unlocks this vault, and whatever lies within is worth killing for. He folded the map, his movements brisk. We must consult my files on the Order of the Crescent Veil. If they are active again, their methods will reveal much. But first, we must ensure this cipher is not a trap. He crossed to his chemical table where a small vial and a brush awaited. Dipping the brush in a solution, he swept it across the paper, revealing faint traces of additional ink, hidden marks invisible to the naked eye. A secondary message, he said, his voice low. The Order was fond of such tricks. The hidden ink revealed a single word: Cheapside. Holmes's eyes gleamed. A clue within a clue. Cheapside is a hub of commerce, with banks and vaults aplenty. The vault we seek is likely there, hidden in plain sight. I felt a surge of excitement tempered by unease. Cheapside is a far cry from Whitechapel. Why was Grayson killed so far from the vault? A question for another hour, Holmes replied, glance and position make him a likely candidate. But his arrogance suggests he is a pawn, not a master. The sailor, too, is a piece of the puzzle. His argument with Grayson points to involvement, but his role is unclear. We need more data. As he spoke, a faint noise came from the street below, a soft tap, like a cane on cobbles, followed by the rustle of fabric. Holmes was at the window in an instant, peering into the fog, but no figure was visible. Our watcher returns, he said, his voice tinged with excitement. The game grows tighter, Watson. He returned to the desk, his mind already racing ahead. The Crimson Cipher is a bold move, Watson. It confirms that we are close, but it also raises the stakes. The vault in Cheapside holds the key to Grayson's death, literally and figuratively. Tomorrow, we shall seek it out. But we must be prepared for deception. I felt the weight of the mystery pressing upon me, the shadows of suspicion deepening. Ashford, the sailor, the Order of the Crescent Veil. Each was a thread in a web of intrigue, and the crimson cipher was a warning that we were walking into danger. Yet Holmes's confidence was a beacon, guiding us through the fog. As the fire burned low, I took up my notebook, recording the day's events for posterity. The cipher, with its cryptic symbols and ominous message, lay on the desk, a challenge from an unseen foe. The scent of lavender lingered, a ghostly reminder of the killer's presence. Tomorrow, we would venture to Cheapside, to the heart of the mystery. But tonight, the fog held its secrets close, and I knew sleep would come hard. Chapter 6. A Trail Gone Cold. The fog that smothered London seemed to grow denser with each passing hour, as if conspiring to obscure the truth of Thomas Grayson's murder. Sherlock Holmes and I, Dr. John H. Watson, sat in the dimly lit confines of 221B Baker Street. The crimson cipher's decoded warning, the key unlocks ruin. Beware the vault at midnight, still ringing in our ears their secrets. As the cab rattled through the misty streets, the clatter of hooves muffled by the fog, I ventured a question. Holmes, do you truly believe this vault is in Cheapside? The docks seem a far cry from a banking district. He glanced at me, his eyes sharp beneath the brim of his hat. The cipher's mention of Cheapside is deliberate, Watson, but it may be a feint. Smugglers favor the docks for their proximity to ships and shadows. The warehouse district is a warren of hiding places, and the Order of the Crescent Veil would not store their treasures in a bank's vault, where records might betray them. No, we seek a more clandestine vault, one that the key and Grayson's death protects. We alighted near the Thames, where the air was thick with the briny tang of the river and the acrid bite of coal smoke. The docks were a labyrinth of warehouses, their looming shapes half hidden in the fog, punctuated by the creak of cranes and the shouts of dockers. Holmes led the way to a derelict warehouse, its windows boarded and its walls streaked with grime. A faded sign read, Hargreave and Sons, the name of Grayson's employer, and I felt a jolt of anticipation. Was this the vault? Holmes pushed open a sagging door, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the warehouse was a cavern of shadows, its air heavy with the musty scent of damp wood and decay. Broken crates littered the floor, their contents spilled. Rotted grain, splintered timber, a few rusted tools. Holmes moved with purpose, his magnifying glass in hand, his eyes scanning the debris for any trace of the vault or its secrets. This is a dead end, Watson, he said at length, his voice tinged with frustration. The warehouse has been abandoned for months, perhaps years. No vault, no goods, only dust and neglect. I frowned, puzzled. But the cipher pointed to a vault, and this is Hargreave's warehouse. Could Grayson have hidden something here? Holmes knelt beside a pile of refuse, his fingers brushing a scrap of cloth. He held it up, said, his voice low. The cipher, the lavender, this warehouse, all part of a game to keep us chasing shadows. But every misstep reveals the killer's hand. We left the warehouse, the fog closing around us as we stepped back into the street. The trail had gone cold, Yet Holmes's mind was already shifting, seeking the next thread. "We must return to the sailor," he said. "The barmaid's account places him with Grayson on the night of the murder. If he is part of this, he may lead us to the true vault." Our next stop was Scotland Yard, where Holmes hoped to learn more about the scarred sailor. Inspector Gregson, a burly man with a penchant for underestimating Holmes, met us with his usual skepticism. "You're still on about that Grayson case?" he said, leaning back in his chair. "It's a robbery, Holmes, plain and simple. We've no leads on any sailor, and the key's in evidence, gathering dust." Holmes's eyes glinted with suppressed irritation. "Then I suggest you check your morgue, Inspector. A man with a scarred face, recently deceased, may hold answers." Gregson raised an eyebrow but dispatched a constable to check. Within the hour, we were led to the morgue, where a body lay under a sheet. The constable pulled it back, revealing a man matching the barmaid's description, tall, broad, with a livid scar across his cheek. His throat bore the marks of a garrote, and his eyes stared blankly, frozen in a moment of terror. "Found this morning floating in the Thames," the constable said. "No papers, no name. Looks like a suicide, or maybe a dockside brawl gone wrong." Holmes bent over the body, his magnifying glass tracing the marks on the neck. "No suicide," he said sharply. The garrote was applied with precision from behind. This was murder, staged to look self-inflicted. The killer is tying up loose ends. I felt a chill, not from the morgue's cold, but from the realization that our quarry was ruthless, eliminating anyone who might betray them. "The sailor was involved," I said, "but not the mastermind. Who is pulling these strings, Holmes?" He straightened, his expression grim. "Someone with resources and center." "The vault is real," he said, his voice steady. "The warehouse was a ruse, but Cheapside remains our target. The order would hide their treasures in a place of commerce, where suspicion is dulled by routine. We must search the banks and storage houses there, but discreetly." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "And we must be wary, Watson. The killer knows our every step. The cipher was a lure, the warehouse a trap. We are close, but so are they." As night fell, the fog pressed against the windows, and I felt the weight of the mystery deepen. The trail had gone cold, but Holmes's resolve burned bright. The key, the symbol, the vault, they were out there, hidden in London's shadows, and I knew we would find them, no matter the cost. Chapter 7. The Dockside Encounter. The fog that clung to London's streets seemed to pulse with secrets as Sherlock Holmes and I, Dr. John H. Watson, ventured back into the labyrinth of the East End. The trail of Thomas Grayson's murder had grown colder with the discovery of the derelict warehouse, a deliberate misdirection, marked by the taunting scent of lavender, and the grim confirmation of the scarred sailor's murder in the morgue. The crimson cipher's warning, "The key unlocks ruin, beware the vault at midnight," echoed in my mind, its mention of Cheapside clashing with the dock's grim reality. Yet Holmes, undeterred by the killer's cunning, had seized upon a new lead. A tip from one of his irregulars, a street boy who had overheard whispers of a cloaked figure frequenting a dockside tavern near Wapping. The brass key, the symbol of the circle, cross, and crescent moon, and the shadowy order of the crescent veil loomed ever larger, and I felt the noose of this mystery tightening around us. It was nearing dusk, the fog thicker now, swirling like a living thing around the gas lamps that struggled to pierce the gloom. The Thames was a sullen presence, its waters lapping against the docks with a rhythm that seemed to mock our pursuit. Holmes, His greatcoat buttoned against the chill had adopted a disguise, a docker and a bar stained with years of spilled drink. Holmes, his eyes sharp beneath the brim of his cap, led us to a corner table where we could observe without drawing attention. "Keep your eyes open, Watson," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the tavern's clamor. "Our man is here, or has been. The lavender scent, the cane. These are not common in such a place. We seek a figure out of place, one who moves with purpose." I nodded, scanning the crowd. The patrons were a rough lot, sailors with weathered faces, dockers with calloused hands, and a few shifty types who eyed us warily. My hand rested near my revolver, a precaution born of the sailor's fate in the morgue. The killer was ruthless, and I felt the weight of their unseen presence. Holmes's gaze settled on a man at the bar, half hidden in shadow. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore a cloak that seemed too fine for the tavern's rough clientele. His face was obscured by a low-brimmed hat, but I caught the glint of a silver-tipped cane resting against the bar. Holmes leaned closer, his voice a whisper. "There, Watson. Observe his posture. Tense, alert. He is no ordinary patron." We watched as the man spoke to a wiry figure beside him, their conversation hushed but urgent. The wiry man, a docker by his attire, gestured animatedly, pointing toward the river. Holmes's eyes narrowed, and he signaled for me to follow as he edged closer, weaving through the crowd with the ease of a man born to such places. We took a table nearer the bar, close enough to overhear snatches of their talk. "The shipment's due tonight," the wiry man said, his voice low. "Midnight, same as always. The key's the trouble. Without it, the vault stays locked." The cloaked man's voice was a growl, too soft to catch fully. But I heard the word Grayson and saw his hand tighten on his cane. Holmes's expression was one of intense focus, his mind cataloging every word, every gesture. I felt a thrill of anticipation. This was no coincidence. The vault sprinted forward, his disguise forgotten, and I struggled to keep pace. The alley was narrow, its cobbles slick with damp, and the fog swallowed all but the faintest outlines. We rounded a corner, and there, by a pile of crates, stood the cloaked man, his back to us. He turned, his face still hidden, and for a moment I thought I caught the scent of lavender. Before Holmes could call out, the man hurled something to the ground, a glass vial that shattered, releasing a cloud of acrid smoke. "Hold your breath, Watson," Holmes shouted, pulling me back as the smoke stung my eyes. When it cleared, the man was gone, the alley empty save for a single clue, a torn scrap of paper, half buried in the mud. Holmes snatched it up, his magnifying glass already in hand. It was a fragment of a map, showing a section of Cheapside with a single building marked, a bank, its outline crude but unmistakable. "The vault," Holmes said, his voice taut with excitement. "This confirms it, Watson. Cheapside is our destination, and midnight is our hour. The cloaked man is part of the order, and this map is their guide." I stared at the fragment, my mind racing. But the warehouse, the sailor, was it all a ruse? "Not entirely," Holmes replied, slipping the map into his pocket. "The warehouse was a decoy, meant to waste our time, but the sailor's death was a necessity. He knew too much, perhaps about the vault or the key. The cloaked man is our link, but he is not alone. The order operates in layers, Watson, and we have yet to reach the heart. We retraced our steps to the tavern, the fog thicker now, the rivers lapping, a constant reminder of the stakes. Inside, the brawl had subsided, and the patrons had returned to their drinks, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded. Holmes questioned the barmaid, who confirmed the cloaked man was a regular, always arriving late and leaving quickly, often with a docker or sailor in tow. She had no name, but the mention of lavender made pierce the fog, to unravel the web of the Order of the Crescent Veil. As we neared Baker Street, the tap of a cane echoed faintly in the distance, and I knew the game was far from over. Chapter 8. The Hidden Motive. The fog that enveloped London seemed to thicken with the weight of our discoveries, as Sherlock Holmes and I, Dr. John H. Watson, returned to 221B Baker Street after the tense encounter at the Dockside Tavern. The torn map fragment, marked with a bank in Cheapside, had reignited the trail to the mysterious vault hinted at by the crimson cipher and Thomas Grayson's cryptic note. The cloaked figure's escape, the lavender scent, and the murdered sailor confirmed the ruthlessness of the Order of the Crescent Veil, a shadowy smuggling ring whose secrets had cost Grayson his life. As night fell, the fire in our sitting room crackled, casting flickering shadows across the walls, where Holmes had pinned his notes, the map fragment, and sketches of the circle, cross, and crescent moon symbol. The air was heavy with the scent of tobacco from Holmes's pipe, and I felt the mystery's threads tightening, drawing us closer to the heart of the killer's motive. Holmes stood before his makeshift evidence board, his eyes darting between the pinned papers. The brass key, the cipher's warning, the key unlocks ruin, beware the vault at midnight, and the map fragment all pointed to a bank in Cheapside, a hub of commerce far removed from Whitechapel's grim alleys. Yet the connection to Grayson, a humble clerk, and the Order's illicit dealings remained elusive. I sat by the fire, my notebook open, recording the day's events, though my thoughts were troubled by the cloaked figure's cunning and the sailor's brutal end. "Holmes," I ventured, breaking the silence. "The map confirms the vault's location, but why Cheapside? And why was Grayson killed so far from it? The sailor's death suggests the Order is desperate to protect something. What is it?" Holmes turned, his pipe trailing a thin wisp of smoke. "The motive, Watson, lies in what the key unlocks." The key, his lavender scent. He must be involved. Holmes nodded, his expression grim. "Ashford is a key player, but not the mastermind. His wealth, his arrogance, his collection of antiquities all suggest he funds or profits from the Order's smuggling. But the sailor's murder and the cloaked man's actions point to a more cunning hand. Ashford is a pawn, Watson, or at most a lieutenant. The true killer orchestrates from the shadows." He pinned the map fragment to the board, drawing a red thread from it to a sketch of the symbol. The Order of the Crescent Veil dealt in stolen artifacts, relics, manuscripts, jewels. The key Grayson carried likely opens a vault containing such treasures, and his discovery of it threatened their operation. The lavender scent is our link. It ties the alley, the cipher, the warehouse, and Ashford together. But it also suggests another figure, one who moves unseen. I recalled the barmaid's words about the cloaked man's fine attire and the urchin's mention of a cane. The cloaked man at the tavern. Could he be the killer? His escape was too practiced, too deliberate. "Possibly," Holmes said, his eyes narrowing. but his role is unclear. He may be an enforcer sent to clean up the Order's messes or a go-between. The map fragment suggests he knows the vault's location, but his flight indicates fear, not control. We need to identify him, and we need to know what Grayson uncovered. Holmes moved to his bookshelf, pulling down a ledger of London's banking institutions. He flipped through it, his finger pausing on a page listing Cheapside's oldest banks. The City and Crown Bank, he said, tapping the name. Established in 1750, with private vaults known for their secrecy. It matches the map's coordinates. Grayson's note mentioned vault, and the cipher pointed to Cheapside. This is our target. I leaned forward, intrigued. But how did Grayson, a clerk, come across such a secret? And why was he in Whitechapel, not Cheapside, when he died? Holmes's lips curved into a faint smile. That, Watson, is the heart of betrayal. But the Order caught wind of it, and Grayson paid the ultimate price. He paused, his gaze distant. The lavender scent is the anomaly. It's too distinct, too deliberate. It may be a signature, the killer's calling card, or a clue to their identity. Ashford carries it, but so did the warehouse and the cipher. We must consider another player, someone close to the heart of the Order. As he spoke, a sudden noise interrupted, a sharp rap at the door. Mrs. Hudson entered, her face pale. "A boy left this, Mr. Holmes," she said, holding out a crumpled note. "He was gone before I could ask his name." Holmes took the note, unfolding it with care. It was written in a hurried hand, the ink black and smudged. The vault is watched. Trust no one. Midnight brings death. The faint scent of lavender clung to the paper, and I saw Holmes's eyes gleam with a mix of caution and excitement. "Another warning," he said, pinning it to the board. "The Order knows we are close. This note, like the cipher, is meant to deter us, or to lure us into a trap. But it confirms the vault's importance and the midnight deadline." I stared at the note, my mind racing. Who sent it? An ally within the Order, or the killer themselves? Holmes's expression was unreadable. "Either is possible, Watson. The Order is a house divided. Grayson's death, the sailor's murder, the cloaked man's flight, all suggest internal strife. Someone wishes to protect the vault's secrets, but another may wish to expose them. We must proceed to Cheapside, but with utmost care." He spread the map fragment beside the banking ledger, tracing the bank's location with a pencil. The City and Crown Bank has an underground vault, accessible only to select clients. The key's design, ornate, antique, suggests it opens a private strongbox, not a standard lock. The Order uses it to store their smuggled goods, and Grayson's discovery threatened to expose them. I nodded, the pieces falling into place. So Ashford funds the operation. The sailor was a hired hand, and the cloaked man enforces the cloaked figure. They hinted at a deeper game, one that Holmes alone could unravel. Chapter 9. The Trap is Set. The fog that gripped London seemed to tighten its hold as the hour of midnight approached, casting an eerie veil over the city's secrets. Sherlock Holmes and I, Dr. John H. Watson, sat in the dimly lit confines of 221B Baker Street, the weight of Thomas Grayson's murder pressing upon us. The crimson cipher, the torn map fragment, and the cryptic note. The key unlocks ruin. Beware the vault at midnight, had led us to the City and Crown Bank in Cheapside, where a hidden vault, guarded by the shadowy Order of the Crescent Veil, held the key to the mystery. The lavender scent, the brass key with its circle, cross and crescent moon symbol, and the murders of Grayson and the scarred sailor pointed to a smuggling ring of ruthless cunning. Lord Ashford's involvement was clear, but Holmes suspected a mastermind behind him, orchestrating a web of deception. Now, with a plan to trap the killer, we prepared to venture into the fog, where danger awaited. The fire in our sitting room crackled, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill of the night outside. Holmes stood at his desk, the map fragment and banking ledger spread before him, his eyes alight with the intensity of a hunter closing in on his quarry. The latest warning. The vault is watched. Trust no one. Midnight brings death. Lay pinned to his evidence board, its lavender scent a taunting reminder of the killer's presence. My revolver, freshly cleaned, rested in my coat pocket, and I felt the familiar thrill of anticipation mixed with dread. Holmes's plan was bold, perhaps reckless, but his confidence was a beacon in the fog. "We cannot wait for the order to make their move," Holmes said, his voice steady as he adjusted his greatcoat. "The vault in Cheapside is the heart of their operation, and the key Grayson carried is its lock. We must draw the killer out, Watson, and there is one sure way to do so." I raised an eyebrow, sensing the audacity of his scheme. "What to act, and we shall be at the vault to meet them." He moved to his chemical table, gathering tools, a lockpick, a small lantern, and a vial of acid for testing locks. "The City and Crown Bank closes at 6, but its vaults are accessible to private clients through a side entrance. The map fragment marks this entrance, and the key will grant us access. We shall arrive before midnight, conceal ourselves, and wait for the order to reveal their hand." I nodded, impressed by his foresight but uneasy at the risks. "And if the cloaked man appears? Or Ashford? We know they're watching." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Then we shall have our answers. The cloaked man is likely an enforcer, not the mastermind, but his presence will confirm the vault's importance. Ashford, if he comes, will expose his role. But I suspect another figure, Watson. One who wields the lavender scent as a signature. We must be prepared for a trap of their own." We left Baker Street under the cover of darkness, the fog so dense that the gas lamps were mere pinpricks of light. Holmes had arranged for a hansom cab to wait a street away, its driver one of his trusted irregulars, ensuring discretion. The ride to Cheapside was silent, the clatter of hooves muffled by the mist. My hand rested on my revolver, the weight reassuring as I contemplated the confrontation ahead. The Order of the Crescent Vale was ruthless, their secrets worth killing for, and I knew we were walking into danger. Cheapside was quieter than Whitechapel, its streets lined with imposing banks and merchant houses, their facades looming like sentinels in the fog. The City and Crown Bank was a grand structure, its stone walls etched with the patina of centuries. The side entrance, marked on the map fragment, was a narrow door tucked in an alley, its iron frame rusted but sturdy. Holmes examined it with his lantern, his fingers tracing the lock. "The key would fit here," he murmured, "but we shall not need it tonight. The lockpick will suffice." With deft movements he worked the lock, the door creaking open to reveal a dark passage descending to the vaults below. We slipped inside, the air cold and damp, faint sound broke it. The tap of a cane on stone, followed by the rustle of a cloak. Holmes's hand gripped my arm, signaling silence. Two figures emerged from the passage, their forms indistinct in the dim light. One was tall, cloaked, his silver-tipped cane glinting as he moved, the man from the tavern. The other was Lord Ashford, his face pale but resolute, his lavender-scented presence unmistakable. They spoke in low tones, their words carrying just enough to reach us. "The key is with the girl," Ashford said, his voice taut with anger. "If she opens the vault, we're finished. The jewels, the relics, everything." The cloaked man's voice was a hiss. "She won't. The clerk will handle it. He's waiting at the entrance. Grayson's sister will be silenced, just like her brother." Holmes's eyes narrowed, and I felt a surge of alarm. The clerk, a new player, and a threat to Miss Grayson. Before I could speak, Holmes signaled for silence. His gaze fixed on the figures as they approached a strongbox marked with the Crescent Vale's symbol. Ashford produced a key, identical to Grayson's, and inserted it into the lock. The strongbox opened, revealing a cache of glittering jewels and ancient artifacts, relics of the Order's smuggling. But before they could touch them, Holmes sprang from our hiding place, his voice cutting through the silence. "Stand where you are, gentlemen," he commanded, his lantern blazing. "The game is up." Ashford froze, his face a mask of shock, while the cloaked man spun, his cane raised like a weapon. I leveled my revolver, my heart pounding, as Lestrade and 2 constables burst through the passage, alerted by Holmes's earlier message. The cloaked man lunged, but the constables were faster, pinning him to the ground. Ashford, his arrogance crumbling, raised his hands in surrender. As the constables secured them, Holmes approached the strongbox, his eyes scanning its contents. "The Order's treasures," he said, his voice calm but triumphant. "Grayson found this vault, and you killed to keep it hidden." Final deduction. The fog that had shrouded London throughout our investigation seemed to lift ever so slightly as Sherlock Holmes and I, Dr. John H. Watson, returned to the warm confines of 221B Baker Street. The events at the City and Crown Bank in Cheapside had brought the mystery of Thomas Grayson's murder to a dramatic close, with Lord Reginald Ashford and the cloaked man, revealed as a hired enforcer named Jasper Klein, in custody, and the bank's clerk, Mr. Henry Varnum, apprehended as the true killer. The vault, filled with the Order of the Crescent Vale's smuggled jewels and relics, had been exposed, its secrets laid bare by Holmes's relentless pursuit. Yet, as we settled by the fire, the crackling logs casting a soft glow across the room, I knew the final piece of the puzzle awaited. Holmes's explanation, the culmination of his deductions which would bring clarity to the tangled web of clues that had led us through London's fog-laden streets. Miss Eleanor Grayson sat across from us, her face pale but composed, her eyes reflecting a mix of grief and gratitude. She had been summoned to Baker Street at Holmes's request, under the protection of Inspector Lestrade, to hear the resolution of her brother's case. Mrs. Hudson had provided tea, the clink of porcelain a gentle counterpoint to the weight of the moment. Holmes lounged in his armchair, his pipe lit, its smoke curling upward like the fog that still pressed against the windows. His expression was calm, almost serene, but his eyes held the sharp glint of a mind that had unraveled a labyrinth. "Miss Grayson," Holmes began, his voice measured and deliberate, "your brother's death was no random act of violence, as the police believed, but a calculated murder born of greed and secrecy. Allow me to recount the chain of events that led us to the truth, for it is a tale woven from the threads of your brother's courage and the Order of the Crescent Vale's treachery." Miss Grayson nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I leaned forward, my notebook open, ready to capture Holmes's words for posterity. The firelight flickered, casting shadows that seemed to dance with treasures. Miss Grayson's eyes widened, but she remained silent, hanging on his every word. The key was no ordinary object, Holmes continued. Its symbol linked it to the Order, a secret society from the last century, revived in our time by men of wealth and ambition. Lord Reginald Ashford was one such man, funding the operation with his fortune, his collection of antiquities a cover for smuggled goods. His interest in the key, as noted by the pawnbroker Silas Hodge, was no coincidence. He sought to reclaim it before Thomas could expose the vault's contents. I interjected, unable to resist. But why was Thomas in Whitechapel, so far from Cheapside? Holmes's lips curved into a faint smile. A pertinent question, Watson. Thomas's note, lavender, midnight, vault, suggested a rendezvous. He intended to meet someone, perhaps to sell the key or expose the Order. The sailor, a hired hand named William Cutler, was likely his contact, a man privy to the Order's dealings but seeking profit or escape. Their argument, witnessed by the barmaid, was a dispute over terms, but it drew the attention of the Order's enforcer, Jasper Klein, and their true killer, Henry Varnum, the bank clerk. Miss Grayson's voice trembled. The clerk? But how? Thomas never mentioned him. Holmes leaned forward, his pipe resting in his hand. Varnum was the linchpin, Miss Grayson, and the lavender scent was his signature. As a clerk at the City and Crown Bank, he managed the vault's access, ensuring the Order's treasures remained hidden. He used lavender perfume, an affectation that marked his presence at the crime scene, the warehouse, and the cipher. When Thomas pawned the key, Varnum learned of it, likely through Ashford's inquiries. Fearing exposure, he followed Thomas to Whitechapel, where he stabbed him in the alley, leaving the key in his hand as a warning to others. I frowned, recalling the clues. The lavender scent, it was so distinct, yet we overlooked it at first. Holmes nodded. A common error, Watson. The warnings to scare us off. He paused, gesturing to the map fragment and the cipher on the table. Our trap was simple but effective. By spreading word that you, Miss Grayson, had the key, we forced the Order to act. Ashford and Klein came to the vault, believing they could secure it. But Varnum, ever cautious, waited at the entrance, ready to eliminate you as he had your brother. His knife betrayed him, as did the lavender scent. I nodded, the pieces falling into place. And the Order? Will they face justice? Holmes's eyes darkened. Ashford and Klein will answer to Scotland Yard, and the vault's contents will expose their network. Varnum, the true killer, will face the gallows. But the Order is a hydra, Watson. Cut off one head, and another may grow. We have struck a blow, but their shadows linger. Miss Grayson wiped her eyes, her voice steadying. Thank you, Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson. I can rest knowing Thomas's death was not in vain. He was brave, wasn't he? Braver than most, Holmes said, his tone gentle. He sought to expose a great wrong, and though he paid a terrible price, his actions led us to the truth. She rose, clasping Holmes's hand, then mine, before departing with Lestrade's escort. As the door closed, Holmes relit his pipe, the smoke curling upward like a final veil of fog. I sat back, my notebook filled with the case's details, but one question remained. Holmes, I said, what of the Order's mastermind? You suspected someone above Ashford. He exhaled, his eyes distant. A shadow, Watson, one we did not catch. Varnum was the killer, but the Order's true leader remains hidden, their influence vast. Crime, like trust, is a fragile thing, built on loyalty, broken by greed. This case reminds us that even the most meticulous plans can unravel when one man's courage shines through. I nodded, struck by the lesson. Trust, when misplaced, can lead to ruin. But truth, pursued relentlessly, restores order. Holmes smiled, a rare, genuine expression. Well said, Watson. Now,